Let me put on my glasses to read to you really quickly here. The more I follow my intuition, the more I reject modern culture. The more I reject modern culture, the freer I feel. The freer I feel, the happier I am. The happier I am, the more I'm rejected by modern culture. It's brilliant because it's true. Who is it true for? Who wrote this? Who said those words? A former actor by the name of Clifton Duncan was educated at the best acting schools in New York, was performing. Maybe the problem is he's black. Maybe the problem is he's straight. Maybe the problem is he's not woke, that he's anti-DEI. I can't wait for you to hear my conversation with Clifton Duncan. That is next.
Welcome to the Michele Tafoya podcast.
Sometimes I think only actors can wear hats that well, Clifton. I mean, it's like I look like crap in hats, so I never wear them. But look at you. You're wearing that hat, man.
Well, you know what's funny is that I noticed that the hats that I wear tend to also look really good on other people. So it might just be my hat that you need.
Okay, then I'm going to remember this hat and I'll try it. It just means you're a trendsetter and you have good fashion sense. I'm so excited to talk with you. And before we started rolling, I said something and you had a response, and I want everyone to hear this. I said, I love your courage, because you're talking out, you're speaking on Twitter and talking about the things that don't make sense to you. And not everyone's willing to do that, as you know, but you said you don't think of it as courage. What did you say?
Well, I just said that I don't think of it much. I don't think of it as courage, and I don't think of myself as any kind of a hero. I actually wish that I were different, that I were built differently. And otherwise, my life would be much, much easier, and I would probably still be working as an actor right now.
How do you wish you were different?
I just can't keep my mouth shut. I can't do it. And I physically tried. I mean, maybe 10 years or so ago, back before Facebook became the designated social media site strictly for old people, according to Gen Z, I left Facebook just because I got tired of arguing with people. And the reason I kept arguing with people is just because, again, I was sort of butting up against this progressive orthodoxy. And I was being called a provocateur, and people were angry at me. I just got tired of it, but I couldn't shut up. I can't do it. I just can't do it.
But see, that to me is a sign of courage. That is, you're willing to take the slings and the arrows, as it were. You're able to take the incoming. You're willing to argue with people with whom you disagree and where you see a problem. And that to me speaks of courage. But you just said something. You said, I wish I were still. Are you not acting now?
No. After COVIDianism sort of ruined the industry, and then I have all the wrong opinions. I lost my manager. Even my voiceover agent dropped me. So I haven't even bothered trying to pursue any work. There's been a few things here and there, from an independent standpoint, but I've just sort of given up on the whole idea of ever really performing in the capacity that I had been doing ever again.
But that's your talent, and I assume that was what you really wanted.
Yeah, I did my first play when I was 16, which was over 20 years ago, and and it was funny because, I was always an artsy-fartsy kid, and I was going to be an illustrator originally, and I dabbled in like short stories and poetry and band and music, and I sort of fell into acting, and it was much cheaper to go in-state to theater school. I somehow bamboozled them into letting me in. I just kept getting into shows, and people kept encouraging me from the very beginning, which is, again, why I spoke out, and I said, no one... It's funny to run into all these Zoomers, for instance, who claim that the industry is racist. And I'm thinking to myself, well, in the late 90s and early aughts, 2000s, people from my black college professor to my white college professors and everyone in between were saying, hey man, you've got a gift, and if you really work hard, you have a shot at really making a career of this. And I fulfilled that promise.
Yeah. It- so so when did it all change for you? When did you start? What was it that you saw, whether it was on Facebook or in your industry or anywhere else, that made you that riled you up enough to make you want to, like you just said, answer back and argue?
Well, I think we use the term red pilling now. It's become part of the popular vernacular, and I think my red pilling occurred around 2014. Two specific incidents. One was this really convoluted, complicated online controversy, which came to be known as hashtag Gamergate, which we can't get into because it's too complicated. But
Okay.
what I learned from that episode, I saw firsthand how the press and journalists operate. I saw how they stifle discussion and conversation about topics. I saw how they treat um, uh, racial minorities, sexual minorities, and women who don't go along with the program. And I think the biggest thing that I saw actually was, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time and watched all the drama unfold. But I saw how it was being reported on, and that was the big moment for me where I said, these people are just lying. They're just straight up lying, or they don't know what they're talking about. And again, I would be on Facebook um, arguing with people who had very strident opinions about what it was. And I just said, no, this is ridiculous. The other thing that happened around that time was the Michael Brown / Ferguson, Missouri kerfuffle. And I noticed at the time that the whole narrative of "hands up, don't shoot" became very, very widespread, and it was the Washington Post of all outlets that had really fantastic reporting. They even had diagrams of the autopsy report and the report from the medical examiner, which was hired by the Brown family, which completely refuted what we were being told about this young black kid who was surrendering and being gunned down in cold blood by this police officer. All the forensic evidence, all the physical evidence pointed to Officer Darren Wilson's story, and yet again, this entire thing became this cultural moment. And then, I'll add one more bonus, which is I went to Black Lives Matter's website, the organization's website, and immediately I said, these people do not care about Black people. There was a section specifically that talked about parents. First of all, I think people in general believed that the protests were in response to excessive force and police brutality, which everyone can get behind. No one likes corrupt police. But at the website itself, there was scarce, if any, mention of police or brutality or excessive force. What there was a lot of intersectional buzzwords, a lot of far left language about LGBTQ, whatever. And again, I'm a musical theater guy. As a straight man in musical theater, I joke that I'm about 12% gay because I love Judy Garland so much. And so, I have no issue with sexual minorities. But the thing is, there was one section on the website which mentioned parents, mothers, caregivers, or whatever. And they went out of their way not to mention fathers. Now, I'm somebody who grew up in a single mother household, and I live that void or that emptiness every day of my life. And so I deeply resent people who make fathers superfluous. And if you don't listen to I call them the bourgeoisie. Black people know, they understand what the real problem is. They understand that the problem is a lack of male figures in these homes and in these communities. They know. And when I saw that, I said, okay, these people are not interested at all in really getting down to the issues that are really plaguing a lot of Black communities in America. And I said, these people are just they're a fraud. And of course, 10 years later, that's all been borne out. So,
Right. Right.
so it was a lot of things at the same time that really kind of opened my eyes to things.
It's so interesting though, because you saw them and you responded to them internally, clearly. So when you started to respond externally, when you started putting voice to your thoughts and being willing to do that, what kind of risk did you think you were taking career wise?
Well, at the time, honestly, it wasn't as bad as it is now. I mean, I got out of drama school, my graduate program in 2009. It wasn't, the politics weren't as fraught as then. I mean, but I was pushing and I was getting pushed back, but never to the extent where I, feared being canceled. But there's this implication of well, we're going to watch your Facebook or whatever, and see if we want to work with you and these kinds of things. But and I saw that, and again, you go back to that question of courage, and I don't. If I'm being frank, I don't know if I would be as forthright as I am now if I were still working. It's just, and especially when things are going well as they have been, there's every incentive not to say anything, and no incentive to really go against the trend. So, so I was getting pushback, and people were saying you're a provocateur, and I'm just asking, I'm posting memes and everything, and asking basic questions, and getting pushback. But I think over time, internally, it was still, I just felt, over time, I felt like I didn't really belong. And when I say that, I mean, even shows in New York, which is where I was based, I stopped going to shows, even if I had friends in them, because a lot of them, I just said, they're making shows for themselves. They're not making shows for the general public. And I don't necessarily feel included as a part of any of this. And I think on top of that, the more I leaned into, for instance, masculinity, the entertainment industry is a very, very caustic environment for men, especially for straight men. And I often joke that the reason I didn't get work in the theater after 2018 is because I'm not gay or trans. And, so it was these kinds of internal shifts about gender and sex, and about race and racial politics that really sort of set this internal thing going. And as the politics of the industry became more and more radical, I began to feel more and more alienated from everything else.
I'm not going to mention any names. I have a dear friend who is a Broadway actress, dancer, singer, actress. She's done a number of shows, primarily chorus work, but a number of shows. She happens to be white and blonde. And so, when they were casting Hamilton, for instance, she was told that need not apply, kind of thing. And I get that to a certain extent. It's like, the only white characters in Hamilton were evil characters. I loved Hamilton, the show. I loved some of the messaging of it, but I understood that there was something there that was, I don't know, maybe you can explain it better. And since then, she has felt kind of pushed out because she's white and blonde.
Yeah, this has been an issue. I have friends who are still in it, white women, and I have another friend who's a gay white man, actually, and he said the same thing. He said, I just feel, he said, getting work is just next to impossible. And I think he recently got a gig, and he was like, I don't like the work, but I mean, it's work. He just wants to work. And I think what people don't understand is, in the industry is, if yes, there are a lot of very prominent, I guess, people who shout their politics, but there's also, like your friend, a lot of just honest, hardworking people who are in a job that they love, and that gives them meaning. And they're very fortunate if they're working in the chorus. I mean, Broadway choruses are some of the hardest working people in show business.
No
And,
question.
I mean, they're doing that stuff 8 times a week, 8 nights a week. It's exhausting. It's physically demanding. That's why when you're in that realm, in that echelon, being fit is a part of your job, and being in shape is part of your job, because you have an obligation to give 100% every single night, because people are paying literally hundreds of dollars to see the best of the best. So,
Right.
And this gets into my frustration with the idea that we're non-essential and all these other things, COVIDianism. But but it's there are a lot of people who feel, a lot of white people who feel as though they're being phased out, and it's been a problem for years, and I think it's causing a lot of deep-seated subterranean resentment among performers, but they know they can't say anything about it.
Well, that's the thing. You can't say anything about it. And I think I don't know, you tell me, I think if people did say something about it, the reaction I would expect would be, well, it's about time. Because, for so long, people of color were not invited, were not embraced in this culture and entertainment. So yeah, so get a taste of your own medicine, even though these people like my friend and your friend had nothing to do with any of that, but is that kind of, am I on target at all with that response?
Yeah, I mean, it goes a step beyond that because you're dealing with people who, I mean, first of all, you have to understand the context. In 2020, after the death of George Floyd, the industry as a whole and the theater in particular, and I always say this: if you think Hollywood is woke, the wokeness in the theater industry is 10 times more concentrated. And so after George Floyd died, there was this firestorm of a reaction, and there was this infamous document that was published called "We See You, White American Theater," and it I can't read it or reference it without laughing because it's just so melodramatic. It's so over the top. And, I mean, there's a section, I mean, it literally is a manifesto. And there's a section of it where they compare doing, for instance, talkbacks and galas with producers and backers. They compare it to slavery because they're saying we're not being paid to speak to these people. I'm like, well, no, they're paying to finance your show so you have a job, and they want to meet the artists. I mean, it's just a part of networking. It's part of the industry. It's a part of, just keeping the engine going, but they're comparing it to slavery. And so, I got these messages from people I'd worked with, from institutions I'd worked with. I mean, one in particular sent out this survey about how I feel being in white theater spaces. Now, I've never in my life, in 20 plus years of doing theater, never have I ever stepped into a rehearsal studio or on a stage and looked around and said, my God, it's very white in here. No one has ever done that.
Yeah.
I had this other institution say, and progressives, I use progressive with quotation marks, but they always do this. They say, we know this is happening. We know this is how you feel. We know you feel excluded. We know that you feel. And this is an institution which they invited me as an actor one year, and then they invited me back I think a year or two later to perform a solo show that I had written. And I was always embraced by these communities. I've always been embraced whenever, whatever I've done in my career. But putting that aside, what you find is that these people have to erase the accomplishments of truly fantastic people in order to preserve their narrative. So for instance, you have someone like an Audra McDonald, who is a 5-time Tony winner. She's literally making history just by being alive. This is a Black woman. And Black women like her, or LaShawns, people like myself, or a Ruben Santiago Hudson. I mean, there's or Ben Vereen, Andre DeShields, all kinds of wonderful performers who blaze the trail for guys like me. This is to say nothing of the Harry Belafontes, whom I've met, or the Poitiers, the Ethel Waters, the Lena Hornes, Diane Carrolls, who have again blazed the trails before that. And so they have to, or James Earl Jones, he stormed Broadway in the 60s. Sammy Davis Jr. on Broadway in the 60s. And they have to pretend like none of these people ever existed in order to uphold this idea that people like me have always been excluded. And if you do speak up and say, well, no, then you become an exception, which is also racist. They say, well, you're just an exception. And so which means that the default is that you're a victim and that you've been oppressed. And it's a really, really ridiculous way. And the last thing I'll say is, which makes me laugh, is that, I got messages from these people that I'd worked with before, these aggrieved white women who were just like, oh, I'm so sorry for everything you're going through right now. And if I can help in any way, and I'm thinking to myself, this is really racist, because what you're doing right now is that you're presuming that your life and your existence and your experience is superior to mine simply because you're white and I'm not. I've never once said, that I felt discriminated against, or that I felt people were behaving toward me in a prejudiced way. I mean, my resume is filled with everything from musical comedy to Shakespearean tragedy. I've excelled in everything, and I just never needed these initiatives. And I just find it ironic that for all their pushes for diversity, they've now pushed someone like me out at the very time they claim they want someone like me in the industry.
It's an amazing statement you just made. Their diversity, equity, and inclusion is very specific. It's not including everyone.
Well,
It's only people who agree with them.
I joke that they just want communists of color, but the problem with these things is that these people don't understand the intellectual roots of these things. So they get hung up on just the words or the idea. Oh,
Yeah,
diversity. Oh, equity. Oh, inclusion. It sounds wonderful. It does
sounds
sound
great.
wonderful,
Yeah.
but once, like, I read the Communist Manifesto in, gosh, maybe it was 2015 or so, and I got about halfway through it, and I said, aha, this is what people mean when they say cultural Marxism.
Yeah.
Everything that Marx has said about economics and class war, they've simply transposed it onto issues of race, race, gender, sexuality.
That's
And
exactly right.
in a way, it's even more insidious because at least, I mean, the error in Marx's thinking was that you're staying in these classes permanently. There's no idea that maybe from decade to decade you move up one class or you lose all your money. You move to a different class.
Right.
He doesn't recognize the individual capabilities of single people or of groups. But with the identity Marxism, as it's been called, these are obviously traits that you can't change. So that's why an Oprah Winfrey or a Michelle Obama can claim that they're oppressed, because they are Black, and as Black people, they are automatically slotted into that oppressed class, and so that's why it's very insidious. And I don't see a way out of this cultural spiral that we're in, just because it's so deeply embedded, not only in the industry, but I think also in the consciousness of a lot of Black Americans and of Americans in general.
I'm a little depressed that you just said I don't see a way out, because it is so insidious, and it's a spiral that and it does feel a little out of control. One of the things that I see happening though now, and it's in large part thanks to people like you who are willing to call it out, is that many more people are looking at it skeptically now and saying, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. United Airlines wants to first and foremost, they want to be diverse. Maybe safety isn't first in their world, whatever the case may be, that DEI is top priority number one, and their ESG scores and all of those things within these industries. And then they see stuff go wrong. And it's not just that, it's that people are feeling the impact on their own families, perhaps. So you really don't think there's a way out?
Um, it's tough to say. I mean, I was just talking to a friend the other day where I said, we're talking about ideas. Ooh, excuse me. We're talking about ideas that, implemented by, say, Russians or by the Chinese, who are not dumb people, and yet they went, or the Germans, who went through with similar, or the French, all these people who went through with these similar ideas, and it caused misery and mass death, and that did not stop them. It took world wars to end these kinds of things, and then after the World War was over, in places like Russia, the Soviet Union, it took decades before it sort of collapsed. So if you're looking at something on that massive of a scale, and even then it didn't stop these people from acting on these ideas and ideals. The theater and the arts and humanities in general, I don't see them stopping. What I will say is that we are living in a time where mass communication, the whole paradigm has shifted, and it's become much more decentralized. I think what's really funny in the wake of Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter — I'm not calling it X, it's Twitter. His purchase of Twitter is that I don't think I've ever seen on a regular basis. I don't think we've ever seen how much journalists, in particular, corporate journalists, are absolutely despised. They get ratioed all the time. For those who don't know what a ratio is, it's when a post is made and the comments outnumber the number of likes on a post, and they're usually pretty negative.
Yeah.
So, and I think communication in general is becoming decentralized. I think in industries like comics, publishing, music, the fact that now artists can build a direct connection with their followings, with their own fans directly, without these gatekeeping industries is powerful. And I think that while the institutions may be dying, the industries may be dying, the ingenuity of individuals and groups is not, and the internet will be the next will be able to empower these people. Putting on shows and movies is really, really hard, but I think it's only a matter of time before we see people like maybe Mr. Beast or Patrick Bet-David or something like that producing their own feature films. And now we just have to get to a place where the artists can kind of come together and organize stuff. And we're already doing that sort of on an underground. So it's really cool.
I think that's cool as well. I find some of the best journalism out there is on Substack or places like Barry Weiss's Free Press. It's away from the New York Times and the Washington Post and becoming more, as you said, independent, which is a very good thing. I need to ask you before we're finished, what are you doing now? What you have all the makings of a tremendous performer, but you're also there. You seem to be kind of a renaissance man, if I'm summing you up right here in our 25 minutes together so far. You got it all, man. And so you could do whatever the hell you wanted to do. So what is next? What are you in? Where are you? What are you getting into?
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm still figuring it out. These last few years have been a time of great upheaval, and I often ask myself why has all this happened in the way that it has, and I wonder if it's I wonder if I was narrowing myself too much by confining myself to only being an actor. So, it's devastating to have lost what I did, but at the same time, now, and I am on this path of self-development and becoming a bit of a renaissance man. I mean, I just downloaded the other day. I'm really excited to read it. 6 Easy Pieces, the Richard Feynman book, the physicist.
Yes.
I'm learning about, I'm just going back and learning about philosophy and rhetoric and, in addition to, and part of my mission, I think, is to impress upon people the importance of the arts. So, I'm writing primarily either via Twitter or via my Substack. I have a podcast as well, where I talk to all kinds of canceled artists who are always better than the people who canceled them, by the way.
Yeah.
And maybe so on and so forth. Maybe someday down the road I'll perform again. I mean, I have some ideas. That there's one which I'll tease, this idea about a solo show about centered on the life of Thomas Sowell. Thurgood Marshall and Paul Robeson have shows about them.
I just got the chills. The chills.
So I think moving forward like that, now I have a YouTube channel which has about 25,000 subscribers on it. So I'm thinking to myself, if I can't be in the entertainment industry, I have to find a way to be bigger than the entertainment industry. And whether by hook or by crook, it seems that the more I open my mouth, my following keeps growing. And I guess I'll somehow find a way to take advantage of that and see where it goes. But, I don't have any concrete answers right now. I think a lot of artists are just licking their wounds from the past few years and figuring out what the next step is. But, we'll see. We'll see.
All I can say, I want to do that goofy slow clap for you because I don't care if you don't think it's courage. I'm going to sit here and tell you that it is courageous, because the cowardly thing to do is to get in line, say, I want to keep acting, so I'm not going to speak my mind. I just want to be, in theater. But you didn't do that. So to me, Clifton, you're courageous. I want people, if you're not watching on YouTube and you can't see all the spots that we're running under Clifton, so that you know how to find him. At Clifton Duncan, is it just Clifton? I don't have my glasses on.
It's
at Clifton Duncan.
At Clifton A. Duncan.
At Clifton A. Duncan on X, or Twitter as Clifton. Why won't you call it X?
Because it's so generic and just dumb. I mean, everyone knows that it's Twitter, and it's a more specific brand. It's just better branding, in my opinion. It's
isn't
Twitter.
It funny how everyone always says formerly known as Twitter?
Right. I mean,
you can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter. And,
right.
It's like when Prince went to the symbol instead of just, the artist formerly known as Prince.
Right. Well, side note, I refer to New York as the city formerly known as New York. So there's that.
Yeah, there is that. You can find him on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. He's got a Substack. I just am going to keep following you, and I want to stay in touch with you because you're so smart. You're so thoughtful. We have a lot in common in the way I'm not as smart as you, but I think that we both keep liking to learn. We both keep wanting to learn, seeking new knowledge, and we're not willing to ignore history, by the way, which so many people are. Like you said, this notion of presentism or whatever they're calling it these days, where people can only focus on, they can only see through the lens of now instead of looking back on how things were, how we've evolved. The fact that Michelle Obama or Oprah Winfrey or Sonny Hostin or Whoopi Goldberg thinks that they are oppressed is a joke, and people need to call them out on it. And so someone like you who does it so eloquently and with such a beautiful voice, your voiceover artist, talent agent was dumb. You just keep going, Clifton, because you have an audience that wants to hear you.
Well, I appreciate that, Michelle. And the last thing I would say is that it's one of the reasons I encourage people to read classic literature, because what you learn is that for hundreds, if not thousands of years, even though technology changes, even though customs change, civilizations, fade away, but what motivates us as human beings has never changed. And you see it from the Greek plays all the way up till now. And once you begin to take scope of these plays, these works, novels, plays, whatever, or biographies from the time, you begin to see and understand people in a different way. And when you sort of problematize these materials because, they are offensive or whatever, then you lose that learning and that chain of understanding, that transmission of knowledge. And that's one of the reasons I think that we're in such the place that we are now.
I couldn't have said it any better. And that is why pretty much everything I read is literature from, I love Dickens. I'm on a Jules Verne kick right now, which is kind of silly, but it's really interesting. So anyway, Clifton Duncan, find him, follow him, and hear what he has to say, because his voice is, I just think you're important. So thank you so much for joining us, Clifton.
Well, thank you, Michelle. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. What fun that is. Again, follow this guy. You can follow an infinite number of people on Twitter. Make sure at Clifton A. Duncan is one of them, because like I always say, he is brave, he is doing good, and I suggest you do the same. We'll see you next time.